Bueno, muy bien. Let's go. So, first of all, thank you very much to all of you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you this meeting, this conference, this lecture. I would like also to express my gratitude to the members of the Sala de Dirección, members of the board of Universidad EIA, also directors, deans, vice directors who are taking part in this conference. Of course, I would like to thank Dr. Ian Wright for being here, for being in Colombia. Let me tell you that when I was in Bath, the University of Bath, I had a chance to visit Professor Ian Wright while he was the Vice Chancellor of the university. And I remember the conversation because it was extremely interesting how he developed a very strong strategy to develop the University of Bath. And in that moment, we were discussing about each of us, the universities in which we were vice chancellors also. So I had a chance to discuss with him the main ideas and strategy of Universidad EIA, and he was very interested. And he said, why don't we build together? Why don't we do some kind of research together between the University of Bath and Universidad EIA? Later on, he wrote me and said, hey, I'm here, I would like to visit your university and I would like to work together in research. And I was truly impressed, not only by the conversation with him, but also with the topics that we were discussing, especially related to innovation. I have to tell you that in the British environment of universities, University of Bath is one of the leading universities in topics like basic sciences and especially in engineering and applied sciences. So it was very interesting to discuss how to build innovation, how to build strategic alliances with the productive sector to work around research and innovation. And based on that, he decided to come to Medellin to stay with us and to have the opportunity to discuss with professors and with him in a meeting that we had yesterday. Also, to be with the board and Sala de Dirección and the directors to discuss what we're going to discuss today, which is how to build strong relationships between the private sector, the academia, and the public sector. And how is that important in terms of improving on innovation? How to build more strategic alliances, because as we have talked, strategic alliances today in the higher education system are becoming quite a very, not only useful strategy, but very important in terms of the future of universities in the world. Later on, we're going to have like a dinner with the board of the university. Today here we have a meeting of the board, and we're going to have more or less 1 hour with him, and we're going to discuss about other topics related to his experience as being Vice Chancellor of this university. Nowadays, he's not the Vice Chancellor of the university, but he's Professor of the university, and he's proposing a research that we want to work together. So tomorrow, we'll have a discussion with the professors and researchers on how can Universidad EIA work together with him and other professors from around the world in a research together. As I said, he was the Vice Chancellor and President of University of Bath. Also, he was honorary professor from the University of Cambridge, fellow from Jesus College in Cambridge, and is a physicist, so he's not from the engineering, but he has worked with engineers and professors from the Faculty of Engineering from the University of Bath and also from the University of Cambridge. So for us, and I have to tell you, thank you very much, Ian, for coming here, for being so generous in your proposal and ideas. It's an honor to receive you in this university. Please come back again and enjoy the rest of the visit to Medellin and Colombia. It's your first visit to Colombia. So for Medellin and for Colombia, this is a very important visit. So thank you very much. I give you the word.
Well, thank you so much, President, for your wonderful introduction. I at times wonder whether you're being far too kind to me and whether I need to just check have I really done that. But thank you. Can I also apologize that I am not speaking in Spanish? My Spanish is even worse than my English. I'm from Ireland, so my English friends say I can't speak that either. But I hope that you're able to hear, either understand me or the translation that is being provided. I also am deeply humbled that there are so many important people at this lecture today. I realize that you have given up very busy schedules and very important roles to be here. So thank you. I will simply try and share, as Jose has said, and I hope that that is of some value. Most of my life, as the President has said, has been spent at the University of Cambridge. I was there for 30 years with different roles, the most recent one being Deputy Vice-Chancellor. I moved to Paris about 5 years ago, having worked there in the 1990s. It's a beautiful city. By Medellin standards, it's flat, but we in England think it's got quite hills also. But it is a lovely city, and if you ever wanted to come and visit the university, you would be very welcome. The university is modern. So this is our campus. It was on the top of a hill outside the city. The buildings are packed quite densely, which I'll talk about later on. And in a glance, it was founded as a technological university. However, it was interesting in the 1960s, the first Vice-Chancellor defined technology as the coming together of science and society. And in many ways, that was very deep and profound. And certainly in my time, I have tried to honor that, because with the new technologies that are coming along at the moment, unless there is an understanding of what people want, or communities want, or countries want, then technology is worthless. It has to serve people. We have 20 or so thousand students. That's quite a big increase. In 20 years ago, it would have been about 4,000 students, so it's gone from 4,000 to 20 in about 20 years. We place great emphasis on trying to give the students the best jobs they can get. So a high proportion goes straight into employment. We have about 150,000 alumni or graduates from about 170 countries. And we try to maintain openness to other parts of the world, and I know that's very important here, and there's a wonderful international office that has been very super in the last few days for me, but we try and reflect international in our staff. So out of our 3,500 staff, we have about 87 nationalities, or 90 countries. In the last few years, although our campus has been at, Bath, we have started to build offshoots. And these are really to allow us to partner, and I'll come back to this later. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we've opened a major facility to work with automotive and aerospace industries. We've put it near the industries. This is a big city called Bristol in England. We have built up a very large activity on recycling chemical processes to make them net zero. So we develop materials with very low carbon footprints, working with industry. That was chosen because this region is very interested in building this activity up. And it's jointly with the University of Oxford, so it's a nice place between the two universities. And through that, we bring in a lot of international. The other type of activity that we also have done to try and establish partnerships is to meet needs when government say. So in the UK, there's a government health system. They said to us some years ago, about 2 years ago, there's a shortage of chemists or pharmacists or drugstore people. Please would you set up an activity about 100 miles further south, which we have just done. So in this talk, what I'd really like to do is possibly give a perspective of where UK and to some extent, and European and to some extent American universities are at the moment. Look into the past on purpose, because sometimes when you're thinking about the future, it's good to see where you've come from. And on that basis, talk about partnerships. And for us, we've tended to start with industry or business or private sector, and then use that as a vehicle to working with other universities, UK or overseas. And then I'll talk a little bit about entrepreneurship at the end, if you'd like. So this is, I'm afraid, a European view. I don't think I'm qualified to speak about other types of university, so forgive me if it's a bit narrow. But basically, this is the history of European universities. They do go back quite a long way, but basically, the first, until about 1600, they taught very few subjects: religion, philosophy, medicine, and law. They were all private. The students had to find their money for somewhere, and they overwhelmingly went into the church or into the courts of the kings. There was a big change in about 1600 when the printing press was invented. So books could be printed, and you might find it's odd, why am I talking about this? But if you'll bear with me, I will explain. At a university like Cambridge, before 1600, it took 5 years to graduate. As soon as students had a book to read, it took 3 years. So the impact on universities was dramatic, and that suddenly meant that universities started to engage in science and technology subjects much more. And there was this concept of training people for a much wider range of roles. Then, in the last 100 years or so, I regret, partly due to world wars, we've seen this word scientific research creep in, and a lot of government investment has come in. And it's been an interesting period, because if you, say, work at Cambridge University, you're acutely aware you're a university that's 800 years old. But government involvement's only been in the last 100 years. And there's a major debate as to whether that is a blip, a one-off, and it'll go back to totally private, or whether this is the start of something long-term, or in between, whether some things will be long-term and some things will be blips. And this is really at the heart of quite a lot of the debates in the sector. So there's a massive expansion of the university sector in Europe and America, particularly after the Second World War, where it was perceived to bring a lot of benefits. But for me, far more important is the development since 2000, where suddenly there's been a much greater expansion. So this was 10 years ago. There are more than 15,000 universities worldwide now. I was a founder of the Global Engineering Deans Council for engineering deans right around the world. Even in 2010, South America had twice as many engineering graduates, had more engineering graduates than Europe and North America put together. Twice as many graduates as Europe. And so if you think of the consequences of that and where the critical mass of expertise will be in 10 or 20 years, it's not going to be in Europe compared with other parts of the world. And here is a good example of where it might be. So there is the global. Suddenly you see this word economic impact creeping in. Universities starting to be asked to do that. I'll talk a bit about global mobility of talent. You know, obviously, International Office here does a great job. There's a lot of feeling that the world will be a better place if there's better understanding. But can I just note, there's a fourth bullet point about the hugely important role of information and communication technologies. And I'm biased because that's my research field. But actually, I would argue that these three wouldn't have happened without it. I.e., global communications makes it far easier for people to be mobile. It's having a massive impact on universities, remote teaching, online learning. AI is meaning that students can use their computers to write their coursework. And so one of the big debates in Europe is whether actually this will have had a far bigger impact than the printing press. And finally, we start seeing nation states funding research for competitive advantage. It starts becoming politics. So, for leading global universities in Europe, say, there's been quite a major change over my lifetime of role. Yes, the education and training of citizens is really important. And social mobility is really, really important nowadays, benefiting from international engagement. However, in research, things are a lot more complicated. Research, commentary, evolution, and transformative ideas are really, really important. To some extent, they were, but they were often important when I was young by professor having a good idea, whereas now, it's much more of a sectoral issue. Expertise base, the universities are increasingly being called on to deliver this. The generation of obviously new knowledge discovery and invention, that invention word is much more important. And then in the last 10 to 15, 20 years in Europe and the US, this great emphasis on being vehicles for growth. Enhancing indigenous industry and business and attracting inward investment. Rebalancing the economy from the old industries to the new when necessary, and being sources of innovation. And Cambridge is a really good example of that. Like over the last 10 years, the typical GDP increase of Cambridge has been over 10%, which compared to the rest of the UK is far higher. The number of new jobs from the Cambridge University in the spin-outs is now over 250,000 people. Now, research itself has changed a lot in my lifetime. And in many ways, you'd think this is brilliant. So I'm really sorry about how difficult this is to read. This is the World Bank data on the percentage of GDP spent on research from 1996 to 2021. Now, of course, wealth has been growing up, but if you look, it was picking up quite nicely from the credit crunch. Countries were investing in research, but in recent years, it's really started to rise. Now, in one sense, all universities in the UK and Europe, America, and other parts of the world will be saying, hey, we've never had it so good. But actually, things never are always brilliant. There are always trade-offs. And so the impact on universities in terms of how they're assessed in Europe has changed dramatically. So when I was a young academic, most of the universities in the UK would have pockets of research. A professor would write a paper, it would be assessed, was it good or not, possibly by his colleagues, but probably not much more than that, or her colleagues. Research income for some academics would be important, but it was very much down to them whether they wanted to do it or not. But that very much, as research money started being pumped in, changed. And research suddenly became incredibly technical in the way it was measured. So it was no longer good enough to have pockets of research. It was your overall performance that meant that you were judged as a university. Suddenly, it was really important not had you published a paper, but where did you publish the paper, how many people had cited it, what was the impact paper of the paper, and a whole bunch of metrics, H metrics, G metrics, and then the patents that came out of it, the spin-outs that came out of it, and then was your university contributing to high-level boards. That then switched into action, and universities in the UK and elsewhere were judged competitively on that, and they got government grants according to that. Then, of course, that wasn't good enough. You needed to demonstrate peaks of excellence nationally and internationally. And if you didn't have those, then you weren't as good as the next university, which is why a lot of universities got interested in international collaboration, because visibility was king. Membership at really top prizes, how many Nobel Prizes had you, and this sort of thing, that started coming in. And then most recently, as countries have used universities for national competitiveness, thought leadership and influence, transformative ideas and impact, not simply spin out companies, but what is the value of the university to the ecosystem, the economic ecosystem? Suddenly that started being asked. And then, obviously, national and global reputation. And in the UK, that has caused the university sector to become incredibly diverse. At one end, you've got universities that are local universities that are teaching relatively modest degrees, or often certificates or diplomas, to help students, local students, have the skills to get at the local companies. For them, for those universities, 90X, where X is a large number, almost 100% of their budget is teaching income. At the opposite end, you'll have the Oxford and Cambridge. And many people will associate them as just research universities. So you'll get some universities in the UK saying, well, of course, Oxford and Cambridge, they do research, but we're good at teaching. But sadly, and this has been a big problem for universities like Bath, the numbers don't work that way. Because by the time I left Cambridge 5 years ago, the tuition fee income, the fee from students to pay for their courses, was only 20% of Cambridge's budget. 80% was coming from research or other income. So if you were actually to take Cambridge to the advertising standards, it's really a research institute with teaching on the side. However, the teaching of students really, really matters in Cambridge. Really matters. A, the students themselves matter. You want to do good by them. B, if you look, actually, good number of Cambridge's Nobel Prizes actually were, the real work was done by the PhD students, and the ideas were the PhD students. So they really matter. And so as a result, by the time I was leaving Cambridge, we were making a loss of really, roughly, not all that roughly, actually, almost exactly, $10,000 per student per year. Okay? And the feeling within Cambridge was, well, that's what you have to do. Our education is really important. We'll find the money from the 80%. Now, that causes a problem to the teaching universities because, yes, you can be really good in teaching, but if Cambridge can spend $10,000 per year per student more than you can, the chances are their teaching's going to be pretty good. And if you look at the last teaching assessment exercise that was done at the end of 2023, fortunately we were one of them, but of the 6 universities, high-tariff universities that got the toppest possible score, 2 of them were Oxford and Cambridge. Surprise, surprise. So this distinction between teaching and education, or education and research, is not so clean. And for the universities in the middle, it's a big threat. Because when things get hard for a university sector, the top ones open their doors. They do very well, and they suck students from the lower ones out. And if those of you are watching the university sector in Australia, you'll see a major debate going on about how the top Australian universities are doing really well. Government's even talking about taxing them to help out the ones at the other end. Okay, so how did Bath have to respond to this environment? Hope this may be of some minor interest. We had a strategy development. It involved, actually, interestingly, us asking 7,000 people submitted information. And whereas normally in a university, if you ask 7,000 people for your views, you expect 10,000 different answers, actually 2 came back. One was, interestingly, the students wanted excellence in education, and they also wanted excellence in the research, because they felt that that contributed to the education. It was really interesting. The staff wanted inclusive community to really strengthen the ability to teach and research, but also this partnership word, which we'll talk about. And so we developed 4 pillars, the core things you would expect a university to do. Is this okay? Education and research, but to put great emphasis on building up a really strong academic community, both students and staff, and also strategic partnerships. And there were a number of different categories of partnerships: industrial partnerships or company partnerships, university partnerships, and obviously international partnerships, overarching that. And then finally, last but absolutely not least, government partnerships. Having good enough communications that if you had a good idea. Now, please may I stress, these should not be thought as 4 separate pillars. The real way we thought about them was using them to create a virtuous circle. Now, you could start anywhere you want here, but let's say we're doing excellent education. If actually we've got a really good learning community, that will actually enhance the atmosphere within the university, the ambition of the staff and the students to learn more. They'll start talking about things. They'll generate better ideas. Their final year projects, am I speaking too quickly? Final year projects will lead to papers. That means we'll have improved research. The improved research gives, yes, new knowledge and impact, maybe through spin-outs and things, but it certainly leads to global rankings. And these days, global rankings and partnerships are hugely important in attracting then the best taught and doctoral students and staff from the UK and globally. And if you've got really good people, then they'll teach better. And so that was the game plan. But as I said, given the context we were in, we needed a USP. And therefore, we decided, first of all, I'll come to the USP in a minute, but that's one of the reasons why we pushed so hard on quality rankings. We saw it as a way of actually enhancing our financial sustainability, when most people at the time when we started this thought, well, doesn't that mean we're going to spend more money than we might need to, and we could save it and do other things? So last year, we were lucky to get into the top 5 in the UK, which is the highest we'll get. Oxford and Cambridge and 2 arch universities are above us, and that's as high as we'll get. QS World Rankings, we just got into the top 150, and because of the improvement, we got the Sunday Times Award. This was very much built on student satisfaction, which I'll come with, partnerships in our research. Our researching has grown a lot, and we've had national awards for our startup companies. But we needed to develop a USP, and as well as that, and we decided to, the way in which we developed the USP also actually had at the heart of its partnerships. So I've said at Bath, we felt employability was really important. Our students certainly want it. They want to get good jobs. And so you'll forgive me, many universities, when they talk about their industrial partnerships, will talk about what companies benefit from and what companies want and meeting their needs. I'll turn that on its head in this lecture, Because if partnerships are real partnerships, both sides win. And so, given I'm giving a talk from a university perspective, I'll talk about what we were trying to achieve. So at Bath, we came up with what we felt were 5 attributes that we wanted in our students, okay? So, well qualified, get good students, just like EIA. They're good to teach, they work hard, they get good results in their exams, and as a result, everybody thinks highly of their degrees. But in addition to this, when we're teaching them, we encourage them to think high and actually challenge themselves against others. And this is partly why the partnership starts coming in, because we encourage them to go in team and in some case competitions against other universities in the UK or local. So I'll talk about Heart in a minute. Bath Hydrogen is where we've currently got a group of undergraduate students trying to beat the land speed record for a hydrogen car. We won the UK United Nations Debating Championship earlier last year. We frequently build racing teams that go out and race against. And this gives you a sort of sense. So for example, one of our students won the translation competition for all people within the United Nations this year. This chap got a special award for this is a social enterprise developing a hand-operated washing machine, which is now rolled out in refugee camps in Syria and other places around the world. Encouraging our students to go for quite tricky academic competitions at national level, be it, this is a statistics example, this is a PhD example. And then this is the case, we were the only UK university to enter the International Artificial Heart Valve. These are undergraduate first degree students, and we ended up winning them. Now, winning or not is not really the important thing for me. It's the fact that actually we're encouraging them to go for things and think big and try and attain. The next thing is well experienced. Between 60 and 70% of our students go for a full year in placement, either in the UK or around the world. And we work very hard to prepare them for that and to work in partnership with companies, because you're talking about a few thousand students here going every year. It's hard work, but we find it makes a massive difference to the employability. And if you'll give me, I thought I'd give one example for this. I'm not sure, given your financial expertise, whether you ever came across Andy Haldean, who is Chief Economist of the Bank of England. But this is the sort of thing that we're trying to encourage by industry partnerships, or corporate partnership. I spent 32 years at the Bank of England. I had a steady stream of fantastic placement students from Bath through the bank. So I know how rich Bath is and how rich those placement schemes are, to such a point that we just hired loads of Bath students just for that reason. Now that's very nice to be able to tell the students, and they really, really enjoy it. The companies often learn a lot from it. Then the fourth and fifth are the well-rounded and well-grounded. We encourage students to get involved in societies just as you do here. And we also try to create this village concept. The campus is designed to be a village so that the students meet each other and talk a lot. Now, before I talk a little bit more about our societies, because I think this is really important, because again, we really try to encourage the students to go for it. We would argue that these 5 attributes are the attributes most employers want. Every now and again, yes, a company will want someone that's just utterly brilliant, say at coding, and it doesn't matter if they're totally rude to everybody around them and won't listen to anything because they're just so good. But most companies, we think, want all of those for the top employers and really to deliver. And that's why we've just configured our education that way. The sport, I do want to give sport as an example. It's quite a big deal for us. But again, it highlights what we feel is really important when you're encouraging students to really push themselves to see what they can do the best. So we've been very fortunate. Tokyo we won 21 medals, 11 gold. Some of these are, since 21, we've won either 300 international medals for sport in some description. And what we find interesting about this is that this is done really by the students driving themselves very hard with the coaches. It's not really a university thing. This guy here is a mechanical engineering student who's won the largest number of medals in any Commonwealth Games record. He really, is quite an interesting character. He's incredibly dynamic, incredibly forced, sees his sport as a vehicle. And so what we've tried to do in recent years is actually start to use those societies to drive our own research and innovation and to drive our teaching. So for example, thanks to our work in football, we were awarded the first FIFA, does that make sense? FIFA Masters. This is for doctors so that they can learn how best to encourage best medical practice around the world in football, and FIFA can use it as a vehicle for giving back to countries. We also have been very, very keen to encourage research. So we won the first, again, in partnership, Bath and Edinburgh, but working very closely with the International Olympic Committee. This is a new research centre focusing on concussion. I don't know if it's true in Colombia, but the footballers in the UK are starting to get quite serious illnesses. We've already got quite a lot of prototyping work where in the mouth guards we now put accelerometers. This is mainly for young children because you're really worried about them getting a bang, not being noticed, and then having something later. And so one can take them off the pitch quantitatively by being able to measure whether they've had too big an injury or have headed the ball. So this then becomes really a very rich source of partnership all around. So basically, partnerships, therefore, with industry, actually we've tried to build around these. So if I start with the degrees, we just redesigned all our degree courses in the biggest way in 25 years. Industry was consulted about what should be taught. A lot of industry members come and teach courses for us, often free. Their projects are very, very important indeed. This is a new type of multi-year industry project. Those competitions invariably involve industry partnerships. The racing car teams have to go and find their own sponsorship money. So they have to go and pitch to companies. The companies love it. It's a really good way of watching their place. The first year I was ever here, Mercedes Formula One team on the spot hired 3 of our students. 1 undergraduate went straight into management simply because of that experience. Our placements mean that as of any given time, we probably have collaborations with 15 or so hundred companies. And that gives us a really good way of partnering. And then in the sports, as I've talked about, in the entrepreneurship activities, obviously, so company and industrial partnerships gets embedded pretty much across at least 4 of the 5 attributes. And of course, it shapes the way the students behave each other if industry's been engaged. So our approach has been trying to embed that in different ways and see where we go. I'll also say that partnerships have been really important to us because the industrial partnerships bring in universities. Universities will always be keen to work with industries, organizations, banks, you name it, or charities. And it's a very, very good way of developing international. And the result has been that we've been able to perform okay nationally. This is basically in Bath, we've got 2 overarching KPIs I use. One is, are the students happy and have they got good jobs? And on the basis that if they've been happy when they were here and they've gone off and got good jobs, you've probably done your bit. That's probably it. And that metric is the combination of those 2. We have then used these partnerships for some of our totally different approach. So The UK government called for ideas for how to deliver digital education, really low cost, very, very simply across the UK. We led a consortium of 40 universities and companies. They gave us quite a lot of money to get it going, but equally we had to deliver a lot. We went from 0 learners to 1 million learners in 3 years. We find that a really powerful linkage because it means we can keep our core competencies in one place, but then spend some of it out. And I've talked about the pharmacy. That's worked with the University of Plymouth, plus many companies. That was quite complicated partnership because we also needed the regulatory health authorities to work with us. This was a totally different new way of teaching, and local government. In research, industry partnerships, we've sought to really embed. Again, we'd like to feel that it's a focus. So culturally, we are unashamedly by saying we're about research with impact. And if it doesn't have impact, then maybe other universities should do it. But corporate's really, really important. And we've tried to restructure our research quite heavily. Working one-to-one research projects, that's been done for years, but we kept being told by other universities, by senior companies and others, we don't know who to talk to. And many of the big issues that other organizations have no longer these days can be solved by one professor. They need different fields together. And so one of the things that we did 3 or 4 years ago was launch Bath Beacons. This was a scheme to encourage academics to come together, to create a beacon, a shining example of research with enough critical mass that industry and others would recognize. We would give them a little bit of funding to allow them to present themselves in a better way, position themselves for research, and this has proved to be hugely successful. So hydrogen, which I know is a topic very important in Medicine. I see Fraunhofer's just moved into Medicine to lead a hydrogen activity given yours. We've ended up being able, thanks to this beacon, to have the right to coordinate all UK research in hydrogen, and are now working very, very heavily. Public health and living well, those have hugely mushroomed with a lot of work going on with companies, government, and indeed actually in the case of public health, we've just been recently awarded a special award by the World Health Organization to drive some of our work. Having done that in terms of our partnerships, the most recent thing that we've tried to do is build centers of critical mass. So this is the one in Bristol, this is the one in Swindon. These partnerships are really quite major. That is a $100 million US facility with another 50 or so million of funding we've been able to raise. Most of this money's come from government or research councils and industry. We put hardly any in ourselves. We've done it by working and building up partners as much as we can, be they other universities. We've been able to get overseas companies moving in base and create those institutes which have a sufficient financial ability to be able to pay their own way, but also act as a dramatic way of lifting our research. And this is in recycling technologies. This is with the University of Oxford. This is a leading composite research centre in the UK. This is an innovation research centre. That's a government arm. And then many other universities and companies are working in with this. And we've probably got, I think, about 80 companies currently doing different types of research project. That sort of partnership then gives you critical mass at national level, because if you want then to go and say, we'd like to be part of a European network, if you can say, well, we're the lead in the UK on X, it helps. And in partnerships in the region, if we can be the lead in the Medicine area, so to speak, that helps. Okay, I'm slightly worried about, I'm running out of time, and you're very important people, and I know you have a board meeting, so I'll be very quick. I was asked to, so I hope that gives you a sense as to why we've tried to position the university in an area where We're working very closely with industry, universities around the world, and government, but in a way that hopefully helps our students and helps and enriches our education and gives our faculty opportunities to work more effectively. Obviously, these days, a lot of organizations are interested in spin-out companies and the like. Bath has got a number of spin-out companies. Indeed, we had our first unicorn. A unicorn is a company with a value of more than £1 billion US, or in UK we call £1 billion, recently. But actually we're at an early stage. And so 2 or 3 years ago, I got some of my old friends from Cambridge to come and do an analysis of Bath and say, how should we have a go about doing it? And they said, well, you've got some good things going. They're really fragmented. They're not really joined up. And there are bits and bits of missing. And you need to come up with an approach that's better. And we think for you, the approach is the concept of the vortex university. And it's very, very simple. This is a circle, you can start anywhere you want, but many of our students really do want to go and achieve. So a lot of them want to contribute to the local companies, or they want to do their startup companies. So if actually we're going to be a vortex university, we need to really meet that need. But if we can do it really well, then we become known as an innovative university. And if you become known as an innovative university, then you can attract investors. And the idea with the Vortex University is that if the investors turn up, you start attracting other people, nothing to do with the university, to come to the university with ideas to see whether actually they could make them happen. So the people come to us with their ideas, both to leverage our expertise and concepts, and also for the opportunities to offer, including our people pool. And that way, we contribute to the regional economy, thriving, and develop a forward-looking vision for the city. And that means that more students then want to stay in the region, contribute to the companies, and do their own spin-outs. And that way you can create this vortex company. So you throw companies out locally or further afield to create wealth, and you suck ideas in as a result of that because more people are aware you're doing it. And those ideas lead to the new company, and you create this sort of vortex of activity. And we feel it's very, very important because one of the themes we're working on at the moment is that actually good ideas can come from anywhere. And the one mistake you can never afford to make is saying, oh, that's a stupid idea. But if you can harness them and use everybody to do it. So therefore, to do that, you have to build an ecosystem. This is what ours is, and they've suggested we have. So we have an enterprise division. I know you've got a really good one. I've watched the EIA videos in enterprise. It's brilliant what's going on here. We have a university innovation center, which hosts companies. That pays for itself, brings income. We have, obviously, then an e-lab, which is an enterprise lab mainly for students. And quite happily, these are separate, but joined up. Enterprise and entrepreneurship is about reducing barriers to entry. It's very easy for a company to be killed very early on. Make it as easy for them to succeed as possible. Don't care too much even if you duplicate. To that, we need students, obviously. Our alumni community matter massively. We've got a lot of very top industrialists and 150,000 graduates, as you will have. They make a massive difference. Many of them give free time just to enterprises, to mentor the students. Research is hugely important to us in driving the new ideas, as you would expect. And our institutes are giving the opportunity for ideas to be taken far closer to commercialization than ever would have been. However, we need others in that ecosystem. We need entrepreneurs that are local because they often help a lot. Strategic partners, big companies will often want to get involved. VCs will often want to get involved. And government bodies and inclusive city enterprises. most of these organizations exist in the UK and in many other places. Now, in many ways, I know that looks horrendous, because why would you ever want to do something so complicated than that? I'm afraid I'm in a university where a lot of dynamic people want to do their own things, so it tends to pop up and you just watch it. But equally, it's really, really important, particularly for budget and sustainability, that you don't try and pay for things you don't have to. And so in Bath, one of the things that we've been very keen to do, we happen to host this, but we partner with a whole bunch of other universities on innovation and entrepreneurship. Because actually, a lot of the services that companies need as they're getting going, these are things that are pretty common. And if you can build up critical mass, you're more likely to have a better service. It's easy to raise scale-up funds, like this organization currently trying to raise about 100 million US for investments of later stage companies. It's easier to do it if you're a team. And if actually you don't differentiate too much, why not? So basically the universities of Bath, Bristol, Exeter, Southampton, Surrey, and actually Cardiff has just joined. It's quite a region, the university. They've come together. This company, I'll talk about what it does, SetSquared, what it does in a minute. It provides early stage company support, it provides accelerators, it provides scale-up advice and so on. And it now has supported of the order of 3,500 companies while we've been doing this, and raising quite a lot of investment, as you can see. These are the different stages that they engage in the activities. So once a company has got big and just needs to scale up to the next stage, that's really not our territory. We regard that not our area. Major investments, again, that's not what Bath would regard our universe strength. Business acceleration and entrepreneurs programs, we do a bit of that, and obviously all these programs are based at Bath anyway, but again, these are a lot of things where there are a lot of common elements. The areas we don't like to share too much are the student work, where we feel our relationships with students are really important and they can shape us, and very early stage researchers. A researcher among the staff who's a brilliant idea, we'll really want to work with them. We really want to help them get that going, and we'll keep those to ourselves, and we'll say, fine, collaborate with others later on. So, with the students, again, I highlighted that for us, barriers is the biggest problem for companies. If you have to work really, really hard to get going, a lot of people give up. And so we've tried quite hard to develop a range of options to support students within our student enterprise ecosystem. First of all, we unashamedly will want to encourage activities we don't have any control over. So we feel it's really important for there to be student-led entrepreneurs activities, a society which the students do what we want. They might make mistakes, but I make a lot of mistakes, so what's the difference? And actually, as long as we're prepared to help them any way they want, that's fine for us, and they will come asking for advice. For a lot of our students doing hardware, prototype funding is really, really important, and we provide that and try to provide lab support. We do believe that competitions are really good ways of forcing thinking. You know, if you get your idea, you don't damage it, you encourage it, but you make sure you've thought about it hard before you start spending money or hiring people. It can make such a difference. So these are different competitions. This is a way for developing people pitching their app ideas. In the States, I think this is called Shark Tank. This is Dragon's Den, is where students will pitch their ideas to investors, and then they get their investment money, and indeed, actually, it's enough for them to normally start hiring staff. One of the ideas we're really keen to see develop more and more, which we find very, very helpful, is there's some students who say, well, actually, what I'd really like to do in my year out is not go to a company, but actually start my own. And so we will actually provide the funds for some students to be able to get a long way down that road, and then wider support. And we're quite excited about this. It's generated quite a lot of successful interest. Entrepreneurships are then for graduates. It's really important. If you want a real strong alumni engagement, entrepreneurship is a brilliant way of engaging with alumni, and showing that you care about your graduates is really, really important. So this is the overarching framework. I'm afraid those were at the workshop yesterday. You had quite a lot more detailed underpinning thinking by this, but I'm out of team. But I think so far it seems to be developing reasonably, and we've been recognized with some national prizes. So I'm going to stop and say thank you very much. You've probably heard enough from me for a while, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
Gracias, Miguel. Muchas gracias por su presentación, muy interesante, y felicitaciones. Yo quisiera saber, en el último tema que ha tratado con más extensión sobre la creación de empresas por parte de estudiantes y egresados que la universidad inclusive financia, si esto se da en mayor proporción en los estudiantes de posgrado o en los estudiantes de pregrado.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for hearing. I think it depends on the type of company. So at Cambridge, a lot of the companies were PhD students or researchers because they were unashamedly high tech. What I found really interesting at Bath is that we've also got a lot of students that want to do business plays. And often they're the undergraduates. So it won't necessarily be a high tech, but they've seen a gap and an opportunity. It can often require an advance in technology or a new technical, they'll have to do technical work to make it work. So, an example is what some of our undergraduates have developed last year, a system whereby the phone, your mobile phone, automatically detects whether you're likely to be attacked. It just works out from the stress levels, and there's hardware. So there's quite a lot of technical work, but those are undergraduates. And we see that as that growing a lot. And many of them, and actually many of the really successful ones as well. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Professor White. And maybe I would like to ask you, because I have seen what you have said, and you see that the University of Bath has something in the next future related to human health and public health and well-being. So I was wondering if you as a university have thought once in the idea of developing a faculty of medicine or not, and what were your thoughts about that, and why you didn't create that program if that was a purpose. And maybe another question is, based on your experience as president, vice chancellor of the University of Bath, which were those ideas that you wanted to implement in the university and you couldn't implement in the university?
Thank you. I might ask for clarification in the second question. For the first, there's a saying in the UK that there are two types of vice chancellor in the UK. One that wishes she had a medical school, and one who wished she didn't have a medical school. And that is the nature. And I know in the US, I had the privilege of visiting top universities, and as far as I could see, the way to financial sustainability for top US universities is buy a hospital. I think when I was there, University of Pennsylvania just bought their 4th hospital to help with finances. We are very open to talking about setting up a clinical school. And in many ways, I'd love to do it. There are good reasons we haven't. One is there hasn't been the opportunity because this depends a little bit on government policy. You have to get regulatory approval. However, there's a bigger reason, and that is that in the UK, many people really are not clear about the future of health. It's very expensive. And what will it actually look like? And we have got a very strong view now that actually, when you're asking what should health look like, it's really helpful to ask who will be the health workers and what will they do? And so we happen to have, for example, a pharmacy department, you know, drugstores, chemists. And it's a very good one. And we've just completed a research analysis, which the UK government has now accepted, which has shown that if pharmacists were allowed access to medical records and were allowed to talk to patients that came into the shop and hear what's wrong with them and then give them the medicine without going near a doctor, we think the saving in doctor time would be 60%. Massive saving. And when you look at, you know, what these things are able to do these days, like I know because it's my research, that there's a lot of sensors that are built into these things where the mobile phone companies are just waiting for regulatory approval. That actually we argue that the area of diagnostics could change. So our vision is to start to build up a health center, which we are doing. We've just won, we're the first university in the UK to win the right to train people for these shops. And we believe that will grow. We believe for disadvantaged people, it's much easier. Many people in the UK don't like seeing the doctor, but they will go to the chemists or the pharmacists. So that's a big plank, and we think that that could be a really exciting area of growth. Rather than focusing on what hospitals do. The second area is that we believe health will be also much more about prevention rather than cure. So I didn't talk about our sport much, but have any of you heard of this? I know football is the only thing that matters, or soccer, but there's a thing called rugby, for example. And these days, if you watch any of the World Cup matches, when the scrums are going down, the men are building, and perfect. Well, actually, that's a good example because the referees now say set, bind, and engage. That is the result of Bath research, which has reduced injuries 70%. And indeed, the latest study in South Africa was no broken backs at all last year, which is very unusual. That's led to a new exercise system being rolled out across WRU, the World Rugby Union, and also actually it's being applied for football as well, which has reduced injuries 50%. And obviously what we're then wanting to do is to apply that to older people. And to try, and actually, interestingly, the local hospital is now using the exercises because they have discovered that people that have had bad heart attacks, cardiac, they get far better if they do exercises in a very clear way. And those patients with cancer, their likely success is far better. So for us at the moment, that's the way we're going, because if you were to go into the big clinical school medical hospital approach, there's a lot of universities in it, and some of us just think that technology could well change things a lot. That's for us. For other countries, I'm sure it's totally different. We have a competitive environment in the UK, but I think we would be really interested in working in those areas because we see there's massive growth, and you're seeing it with the sporting bodies. That's why FIFA's done what it's done. We see it actually being very important for inclusion. I talked about the scrum, I talked about the head injuries. The next thing, interestingly, that we're concerned about is knees, particularly for women, because it appears that in women's football, the injuries are really bad for knees, and they happen in different ways. And the way the sports need to gather has to be different. And if you really want sport to be a cause of health rather than a course of injury. So sorry, that was a very long answer. I do apologize. And the second question was, just to check, sorry.
The second question is that I was looking at your presentation, and it showed me a very comprehensive idea of the educational model or project of University of Bath, including excellence in education, including research, innovation, entrepreneurship, sports, and other issues. But my question was, which are those things that maybe you wanted to implement during your vice chancellorship that at the end you couldn't implement, but you think that it could be useful for the future of universities, such as yours, or this one, or any other one?
That's a good question. I think the area that we could have done, well, no, I think many universities could do more in the future, is have greater ownership and leadership in what we're teaching and why we're teaching it. So we sort of touched on this yesterday. Like at Bath, we did create a totally new framework for our education. The reason we did that wasn't to just simply get to the best. We could. But it was to try and give us a framework to allow us to innovate. Because we should be teaching courses that will be useful for our students 10, 20 years' time. And many of the subjects that universities teach are still pretty much what they were. And so the interplay and the, oh, thank you so much. Yes, there was one. Thank you so much. Sorry. I know there was one then. And so we feel that, and it's one of the reasons we're wanting to talk about, is that these days, many students want to get a first degree, and they sort of use it as a badge in getting a job. In the UK, very rarely is it discussed exactly what is the value of that degree, apart from very basic terms, and what has been the right components across a number of subjects to go into that. And at Bath, I think there are a number of ideas we'd have loved to pursue more and more about doing that, with a way to that then contributing to what the best graduate degrees should be and what later long life learning is. So at the moment in the UK, a lot of people talk about giving students the skills to do the job. That's fine, but a university like EIA, your students are going to be the leaders. They're not going to be the followers. What are the skill sets that the leaders need so that they can embrace any subject, think, apply, and advance? So I like to quote, I'm on the borderline of physics and electrical engineering, and one of my dearest friends, just to make me feel really old, about 10 years ago, did an analysis and worked out that 80% of all publications in electrical engineering, right across the board, had happened since I was a student. And therefore, 80% of all the knowledge in that field had happened since I was a student. Now, that's not going to slow down. And so, having curricula and the wider holistic education that gives the students the sense that they can be ready for the future as well as succeed in the present is something I think requires quite careful structuring. It requires pathways of education. It requires an understanding of what are prerequisites and what can be done in parallel. I think I talked to you yesterday about how I'm very keen at trying to develop the concept of a matrix approach to lifelong learning, where yes, there'll be times when all you just really want to do is to understand what's going on in the field and know the language, but that's probably about it. But there are other times where you actually would quite like to become an expert and leverage your understanding from other fields to advance and go ahead. And to try and develop that approach to education, I think, is something that we haven't done that we'd have liked to. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much, Professor Ian White. As I said, it's a pleasure and an honor to receive you in EIA University. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us. And I think that this has been a very thoughtful conference and lecture in which we can learn a lot and we can build a lot. And as I said before, tomorrow we have a discussion about future lines and ways of research to work together. And I think that's quite relevant in the kind of things that we can do with you and Rajani and many other persons from other universities. So again, thank you very much, Ian. It has been a pleasure to receive you in this university.
Thank you.